Mr. Davidson, just so you have it on tape, could you just give us your name? We're not going to use this, but just give us your name and spell your last name, and give us your phone number so we can give you a call if we have any questions.
Well, my name is Carl C. Davidson, Davidson. My home phone number is 352-4606.
Is it Carl with a C or a K?
A C.
C, okay. Can you tell me a little bit about your family? You said your mother helped decorate this room, so your family's had a pretty long involvement with Christ Church.
My parents joined the parish here, I think, in its second year, which would be 1932, and they were very active in the parish. My mother taught Sunday school and played the organ. Before we had an organ, we had a piano in the little old white clapboard building across the street. For 17 years, my father was treasurer for 12 years back in the 30s and 40s. And other than in my earlier years,
Excuse me, hang on one second. What? You need to get that?
Yeah. Where are the keys?
In my pocket right here.
We forgot one thing,
One thing.
minor.
Oh my God.
I'll be right back.
You pause. No. Comfortable? Not sweeping chairs?
That's your turn.
That's my chair? Okay. We'll do it again. And you were telling us about your family's involvement with the church and
geez, you want me to go through the name and phone number business?
No,
No.
that's okay.
Okay, fine. Well, my earliest memories of Christ Church go back to about age 9, as far as I'm concerned. My family came into this parish, I think, in the second year of since its founding, and my mother brought me here to Sunday school on a regular basis, and the first church building was across the street in a white clapboard frame building, not very large, but usually on Sundays, because of the size of the building and the size of the growing parish, the house was packed. And I didn't take to going to church with my mother and father very easily at that age. I'd have to sit in an awkward position, and my knees would hurt when all the kneeling and everything, but my mother prevailed, and I was obedient. And I think I was probably about 11 years old when Father Day asked me to be an acolyte. So I was his probably regular acolyte for the 7 o'clock Friday morning service in the old church building for quite a few years. And after World War II, when I came back, I continued to serve as Friday morning acolyte in the chapel of this building till I was about age 29. So I have a lot of memories involved here. My memories in this parish were somewhat cut short in the early 70s when I moved down to Florida. And then when I came back here, I moved back to Chicago, and only a few years ago did I return to Milwaukee, primarily because of my children and grandchildren living in this area. I was particularly interested in listening to the stories and memories of some of the other people who are here today. And I don't recognize very many of the faces, but Phyllis Borman, Bab, who I've known, she's been around here about as long as I have, I guess. And I saw Don Prosser there. Don was on the vestry with me back in the late 50s, early 60s. I already told the story about being asked to raise money for the Father Day's memorial window, which is the larger one above the front entry. And in $1, $2, and $3 contributions from all of the people that he had confirmed over the years, many of whom still resided in the Milwaukee area, but others were living in different parts of the country. And it took a little over 2 years to raise the required amount of $2,000, and several other people fought for years to get more money in the budget so that they could be reasonably paid. As far as the services were concerned, you go in the front door and there's sort of a large vestibule where people could hang their coats. And then you'd go into the church proper, and they were just plain ordinary chairs, folding chairs with kneeling benches and several ushers. Well, one of the jobs of the ushers was, before the service, to set out the chairs and the kneeling benches. And then after the service, to pick those up to make room for something else. And we didn't have an organ then, we had a piano. And I remember my mother played the piano. And then when we had an organ, she played the organ. And then the altar was up in front of the church. In back of the altar was, there were two doors on either side of the altar. And they went into a back room. One was a very small pantry kitchen, and the other one was sort of a dressing room where Father Day kept his vestments. And he would always come out, except in the summertime. Sometimes he'd come marching in the front door, but he'd usually come out on the door to the right if you're facing the altar, walk over the altar, go on up and conduct the service. And then when he left, he would walk down the aisle between the two sides and around, and he always walked out on the left door. If you can visualize that. I mean, I can visualize it because I was there. But he was a marvelous man. And this parish has been very fortunate in having the types of rectors that were Father Day and Father Boley. And I really am not personally familiar with the subsequent rectors, having moved away. But every time I drive along Lake Drive and make this turn in my car, I look at this building, and I'm a little sentimental, but also very proud. When this building was built in '41, I was a little too young to be active in anything then, but when the addition was built, Fred Salmond was chairman of the building committee, and he called me and asked me if I would be his assistant, or his secretary, I think is the term he used, and I readily assented. And I found out that he would conduct a few meetings, but the nitty-gritty was left up to the secretary to do all the paperwork and all the solicitation. So I was very pleased that I had a very active role in raising the money to build this building, the addition. I could go on and on and on, but probably said enough.
I could roll tape forever and ever. But
No, I just want to emphasize again that the strength of this parish has just been marvelous over the years since its very founding. The individual parishioners working in their own capacities, always active, always willing to contribute, has maintained a position here of probably the strongest parish in the Milwaukee Diocese.
Do I say my name? Am I on tape?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Catherine Revel Davidson.
Okay, with a C.
With a C. C-A-T-H-E-R-I-N-E.
Okay. Catherine, tell me about your family's involvement with Christ Church.
Well, I was born in 1950 and baptized in 1950. My father was born and raised at Christ Church, and my grandparents were the early families of Christ Church, not of the original 8 founders. My grandparents were some of the best friends of the Barneses and socialized. We're sitting in a room that I'm told that my grandmother was the first person to decorate. As long as I can remember, it's been my home. I've always felt comfortable here. I have a special affinity to the chapel. Both my grandparents' ashes, remains are down in the columbarium. So it's just been a place we've always been. And I have a daughter who is 26, and she grew up here at Christ Church, even though as a young adult she's not involved in the church right now.
That's a continuity that seems to be pretty important, and I'm finding out it's more important. Can you tell me about that? What has it meant for you?
Well, someone said earlier in the Great Hall, they were talking about this, the element of a home, of feeling no matter where you go, that this is a place to be. But I just think historically, the stories that I have heard from Helen Barnes, from Lucille Martin, from Martha Prince, so many people that knew members of my family as I was growing up, the stories that maybe my immediate family hasn't told me, but that they have. My father is a great storyteller, and even though he's not involved actively at Christ Church, he was really involved in the 50s and the 60s, and because of his involvement, which I think really came from Christ Church, his involvement in being on the board for Neighborhood House and Camp Webb, that really affected, especially I have a twin sister, my sister and I, as we were doing things as teenagers. I mean, we automatically became volunteers at Neighborhood House. We automatically went to Camp Webb and later became staff members. There was, in the 60s, there was a program of tutoring down at St. Andrews, which was in the inner city, and in 1965 and 66, and maybe even as late as 67, we would drive from Mequon to St. Andrews, which was like on 18th and Center, after school, one day a week, and tutor kids in, in the inner city. And someone said earlier that if it hadn't been for Father Bowley, this parish probably wouldn't have even known that there were children in the inner city that had never seen Lake Michigan. And we were a part of it. And now, in the year 2000, I look back on it and I think the 60s. We were totally oblivious that that wasn't what everyone else was doing, and that came really, I think, very much from my father's involvement and our involvement in the youth group here at Christ Church.
So you're saying that it really, really was a huge influence on your life and kind of shaped who you are?
I think so. And I've never, we grew up in Mequon, which was a very rural, very sort of sheltered area, but either our father or our mother or together or a couple of neighbors who lived in Mequon literally loaded us into the car on Sunday mornings, and Mequon was a little bit of a haul from Whitefish Bay, before I-43 was in, and in the 50s and the 60s, we came down to church in Whitefish Bay, ended up at Dan Fitzgerald's, for breakfast or lunch, did our little thing, and then went back. But that's what we did, and I continue. I'm not here every day or every Sunday, but it is my home. It is where I come to worship. It is where some of my very important memories have been. We chatted earlier. When I think about my first memory of Christ Church, it is it's just visual. The impact is just right in my face. And it is being downstairs in what was the old Sunday school room, right at probably right below where we are now, very close, with Mrs. Peggy Day, playing an upright piano, and a woman who is still involved here at the church, Mrs. Olson, who was her assistant. I'm like 5 years old. I have a twin sister, and we are marching around the room carrying a wooden cross, singing "Onward, Christian Soldiers." I mean, it is like yesterday. It still gives me sort of goosebumps to think about it. It was a wonderful place to be. I've sat in this room for meetings, for prayer groups, for my grandmother's memorial service. the chapel means an awful lot to me. It's always felt like a little tiny sanctuary. When I was a teenager, I can remember being in Whitefish Bay on a Saturday. You came down to Whitefish Bay to go shopping, and oftentimes we'd spend the night with some of our friends that lived here in town. And I can remember saying, hey, the chapel at Christ Church is open, and it was a place that we'd sit and be quiet. We didn't come to pray. We weren't a bunch of religious teenagers in, what you would think is fanatical, but it was this little sanctuary. It was like this really quiet little place where you could come and get away from the world. And I have now read evening prayer, I don't know, probably in excess of 12, maybe even 15 years. And I still look forward to 5 consecutive nights every 8 to 9 weeks being in the chapel for 20 minutes consistently, either with someone who's reading with you or sometimes by yourself. And there's just very much of a presence of the Lord. There's a spirit that is in this church that you don't always sense unless you learn just to be quiet.
That is strong.
There's kind of it seems continuity here, even though we've been through ups and downs, and this isn't the first time this church has had stress and strife, which Lord knows probably won't be the last, but what gives it the continuity? Why does it keep going? Why do we all hang together?
Well, for one, I can't imagine being anywhere else. So maybe there are a lot of other people that have tried going to other parishes. They've tried St. Mark's. They've gone. I occasionally go to St. Mark's. I sometimes go to the cathedral. I'm not particularly, I would say, close or find that the best friends of my life are here. But the people that I chat with on a Sunday morning or who I speak to today or run into on a street corner are people that I've known for 30 or 40 years of my life. And they're here. And we continue to be here. And whether it's just a smile or whether it's a hug in the sacristy or as we pass through, there is an element of, I think I could call it spiritual love. Not just unconditional, I'll love you for anything, but there is this element of the Spirit that says this is a place of holiness, and we are going to keep making it work. And yeah, we've gone through a lot of difficult times. There was a rector that was here that I can remember in the early 70s when I was searching as a young 20-year-old, trying to figure out where I should be, just home from college. And I had heard about this man on the west side. His name was Stuart Briscoe, and he was starting this new church. And this is, remember, Jesus people, hippies, okay? And I had gone to hear him. And so I came and spoke to the rector and said, why didn't I ever sit at Christ Church? And I was told that if I wasn't happy here, I should leave. And I left. But 2.5 years later, I was back because I missed the liturgy. I missed the beauty of the structure. I missed the people that even though they weren't always really close, they were stalwart. They were my Sunday school teachers. They were people that I just knew in passing. We've had some wonderful rectors here, and every one of us comes from a different area. They're probably the person I just spoke about. Someone else could have been their best friend, and they would have loved him. But we have a lot of diversity in our beliefs, even though we're pretty much of a white folks Bay group, but we all love each other.
That's one thing I've noticed about the Episcopals is that there can be a lot of diversity in belief, and it seems to work together.